Hi, I'm Ken Murky, Head Coach of Fitness Concepts, Director of Training for Joe Friel's UltraFit, and designer of Evolution Running. Evolution Running is a system for teaching running techniques that will enable you to run faster, more efficiently, and with fewer injuries than ever before. In the past 8 years, I've coached 12 national champion triathletes, each of which has used these techniques to enable themselves to run faster.
All right, Joey, looking good.
Athletes in every sport except for running devote enormous attention to perfecting every detail of the movements they'll be required to produce during competition. Runners, on the other hand, assume they'll perform their best simply by running longer and running harder in training. We found that technique plays an enormous role in how they perform on race day.
My biggest compliment of the whole Evolution Running system is that I've been able to run faster, more efficient, with less injuries.
I've never run so fast and so injury-free, as well as it helped me qualify for the Boston Marathon.
This is what separates me from the other guys that race, and it's going to take me through college and hopefully into a professional career someday.
There are two aspects of running we want to improve with our technique. The first is economy. This allows us to run faster without expending more energy. The second is injury resistance. When another runner beats us in a race, we assume that athlete is stronger. Often that's not the case. He's just more efficient. Running economy, or efficiency, is the amount of energy required to run a certain pace. Our research indicates that economy plays a greater role in race performance than the ability to sustain a high level of energy expenditure. So the athlete who wins a race isn't necessarily working harder, but is more efficient. For instance, one athlete might run 8% faster than another, but use only 3% more energy to do so. Therefore, the additional 5% is from economy. I first became interested in running economy when I saw laboratory research on the great African champions. African distance runners have dominated the sport of distance running for more than 2 decades. When compared to other professional runners, they came in average in almost every physiological characteristic important to running: VO2 max, lactate threshold, limb length ratios, height-weight ratios, muscle fiber type, and everything else we can measure in a laboratory. Certainly these athletes are extraordinarily fit, but so are the runners they beat by 2 minutes in a marathon or 30 seconds in a 10K. What makes these African runners so great? Most experts in running economy agree that growing up running barefoot plays a big role in the incredible efficiency of these runners. While I'm not suggesting that you run barefoot, I am suggesting that you learn the barefoot running techniques that make these athletes so efficient, whether they have shoes on or not. So improving efficiency makes an athlete faster. The other thing we're interested in is increasing injury resistance. Injuries are an ever-present risk for runners. We all know an athlete who's lost significant training time and missed races because of injuries. Most athletes rely far too much on their shoes for cushioning. When we land with our weight on the heel, we completely bypass the body's own natural shock absorption system. The tissues in the calf and the arch of the foot are very elastic. The heel is not. The heel is made of bone, which is designed for support, not shock absorption. When we land with our weight on the heel, the shock is absorbed in the heel, then passed up through the ankle, through the tibia, the knee, the thigh, and the hip. None of these regions has significant shock absorption.
The techniques of evolution running train the body to absorb the shock of impact with running in a much more efficient way through the elastic tissues of the body, removing this shock from the bones, and that's where it shouldn't be. So in my opinion, it's far more effective, efficient, and it really helps people run injury-free.
Our research used testing with a machine called a metabolic analyzer to objectify running efficiency. This machine measures the volume of air an athlete expires, along with the concentrations of carbon dioxide and oxygen in that air, and allows us to know exactly how much energy an athlete uses to run a certain speed. If an athlete changes his running technique and sets a 10K PR the next month, we don't know whether he's trained very hard to make himself stronger or if he's really improved his efficiency. This testing allows us to know for sure that improvements come from improved efficiency. Runners that we've taught the Evolution running techniques to have improved their running efficiency by 4.5 to 8%. That might not sound like much, but 1% of an hour is 36 seconds. So a 4.5% improvement is over 2 minutes an hour. How would you like to cut 2 minutes per hour off your race times? I'm sure that by incorporating these techniques into your running, you'll find that you can run faster with fewer injuries, just like so many of my athletes, from beginner to professional.
I don't have to train as much as I used to because I've gained efficiency in my running technique. And as a result, I can spend more time swimming and biking and recovering.
I was always a decent runner, but now I've become an efficient runner with a mode of running that's kept me injury-free, which as an age group triathlete at 50 plus, injury prevention is huge.
Once I started working with Ken, I didn't train many more hours a week, but I got a lot faster, and in my first year with him, I won my first national championship. And since then, this year, I won 3 more.
I made a huge step and went from being pretty decent locally to being second in the world in my first season at the World Championships with the fastest run split. I attribute that not only to their coaching, but also to Evolution Running.
In this section of the video, we'll explain the different aspects of efficient running technique and how you can incorporate them into your running. Any instruction of efficient running technique should start off with an analysis of where runners expend energy. Propulsion is the energy required to move a runner forward. This is the one source of energy expenditure that a runner wants to maximize. The more energy available for propulsion, the faster an athlete will run. Vertical displacement refers to the energy a runner expends to move his body upward during each stride cycle. Obviously, moving up and down does not increase running speed. Vertical displacement is wasted energy that runners need to minimize in order to run efficiently. One reason why a bicycle is such an efficient machine is that wheels provide a movement with zero vertical displacement. The rider's center of mass travels exactly parallel to the road. Runners should seek to duplicate this as much as possible. The energy cost of support is the energy required to hold a runner up. The energy cost of support follows the energy cost of vertical displacement closely. What goes up must come down. The more a runner raises his center of mass during a stride cycle, the harder he will hit the ground, and the more energy required to catch the body's weight at foot strike. The energy cost of acceleration is the power required to accelerate the body back to running speed after momentum is lost during each stride cycle. Most runners slow down at foot strike, braking, and then must create forceful muscular contractions to speed back up. Efficient runners carry momentum from each stride cycle to the next, requiring little energy for acceleration. As this graphic shows, running speed fluctuates throughout each stride cycle. Every runner literally slows down and speeds back up with every step. Average running speed, as shown by this line, can be increased 2 ways. The first is to create more propulsion to accelerate to a higher speed. Obviously, this requires more power and increases energy expenditure. The other is to slow down, or brake, less on each foot strike. This increases average running speed without increasing energy expenditure. Minimizing the energy cost of acceleration is a key to running more efficiently. The energy cost of balance is the energy required to keep a runner's mass over his support, the foot and leg. Efficient techniques keep a runner's body positioned optimally relative to his foot strike. Well-balanced runners require less energy to run fast. Runners spend a certain amount of energy just moving the arms and legs. Efficient runners accomplish this in ways that minimize energy expenditure. The energy represented in numbers 2 through 6 are sources of wasted energy. Efficient techniques minimize each of these, allowing the runner to spend more energy on propulsion and therefore run faster. With a thorough understanding of where runners expend energy, we can now look at ways to minimize wasted energy. The first of those is finding a balance between stride length and stride frequency. If you only learn one thing from this video, let it be this. Efficient runners take relatively short, quick strides at any running speed. Most runners overstride, taking steps that are too long and too slow for the speed they are running, especially at easy aerobic paces. The most important reason for this is vertical displacement. If I were to throw a baseball to you while you stood only 10 feet away, I would throw it on a relatively straight line without having to arc it up in the air. If I were to throw it to you while you stood 50 yards away, I would need to arc it high in the air to get it to you before it hit the ground. In the same way, a runner who wants to cover a lot of ground with every stride needs to propel himself significantly upward as well as forward. As we discussed earlier, this wastes energy going up, the energy cost of vertical displacement, and going down, the energy cost of support. If your quadriceps, the muscles in the front thigh, fatigue after long runs at a leisurely pace, you probably overstride. Long strides also increase impact stress and injury risk. What goes up must come down. Over time, this will cause a greater number and more severe injuries. Efficient runners use extremely high turnover and relatively short strides when running at any pace. This requires less vertical displacement, minimizing the energy cost of both vertical displacement and support. It also requires less forceful contractions for horizontal propulsion by breaking the workload up into more manageable units. When you stretch out a rubber band and then let it go, what happens? It snaps back forcefully. Many human tissues operate the same way. Efficient runners store energy from one stride at foot strike and release it at push-off as propulsion for the next stride, almost as if they had springs in their shoes. While you may not have springs in your shoes, you do have springs in your calves and in your feet. The calf muscles, the Achilles tendon, and the plantar fascia in the arch of the foot are very elastic. Efficient runners tap this as a source of energy as well as shock absorption, using a reaction called elastic recoil. Elastic recoil, if utilized properly, provides runner with free speed. This source of propulsion does not require energy expenditure, and it does not fatigue. The elastic components of your tissues never run out of fuel, never build up lactic acid, and never dehydrate. Unlike a rubber band, human tissue does not snap back as forcefully if the stretch is held. Watch an efficient runner, and you'll see that their feet are on the ground for just a split second. Efficient runners use a stride rate of approximately 180 to 182 foot strikes per minute, regardless of running speed. The energy stored in the elastic tissues is released as propulsion before it has had time to dissipate. Most runners think since taller runners have longer legs, they should have proportionally longer strides than shorter runners, and therefore requires fewer strides per minute. While this makes sense from a physics perspective, it does not from a physiological perspective. Taller runners need to use the same stride length and turnover as shorter runners. This is necessary to keep contact time between the feet and ground short in order to maximize elastic recoil. The key to learning to run with increased turnover is shortening your stride. Many athletes increase their turnover by 20% or more without shortening stride length. They find they can run fast, but they have no endurance. While they feel smooth and efficient, they start breathing very hard, heart rate goes through the roof, and they cannot sustain it. The Evolution running techniques will enable you to run fast without nearly as forceful a push-off. I recommend finding what your natural turnover is before you make any changes to your stride, and gradually increasing that towards 180. We have our runners use a metronome to monitor turnover. This is a small electronic device that will beep at whatever rate you set it to. Metronomes can be purchased at most music stores for about $35. This allows you to monitor your turnover objectively. eventually making 180 foot strikes per minute your natural rhythm. As you work on increasing turnover, keep the movements quick and light. Make sure that your push-off is less powerful than normal. Remember that if you increase turnover by 20%, you will run faster even with a stride length that is 15% shorter than normal. The next aspect of running technique we're going to cover is foot strike placement, where your foot hits the ground in relation to your body. This is a particularly critical part of running technique because if you don't get this piece right, several other pieces become impossible. Almost every runner lands with a foot out in front of the body. This is the single biggest problem with most runners' technique. From the position this runner's in, he cannot possibly create propulsion. In this position, the runner cannot effectively pull himself forward, but must wait until he coasts forward to this position, until his body is over his foot. This coast time causes a number of problems. First, notice that the runner's center of mass, represented by the square at hip level, travels upward on an arc around the position of the foot strike and not horizontally, so the energy cost of vertical displacement will be considerable. As discussed earlier, this also increases the energy cost of support, requiring greater energy expenditure upon landing. This foot strike placement also causes significant braking, slowing running speed at foot strike and requiring significant energy to re-accelerate on every stride. The energy from the runner's last stride carries his body forward from the position here to the position here. Energy from momentum is lost in the process, and additional energy must be expended to re-accelerate the runner back up to speed. An out-in-front foot strike placement also reduces energy return from elastic recoil. Contact time between the feet and ground needs to be minimized to make the best use of elastic recoil. The coast time, required for the runner's body to move up and over his foot placement, allows plenty of time for the energy stored at foot strike to dissipate before it can be released at push-off. The energy cost of balance is also increased with this foot strike position. Try balancing yourself on one foot with that foot 6 inches in front of your body. Pretty tough, huh? This foot strike placement also dramatically increases impact stress and injury risk. When the foot hits the ground, a runner's center of mass is moving diagonally forward and down. An out-in-front foot strike position puts the leg almost in a direct line with the body's motion so that it will absorb the greatest amount of impact stress. Efficient runners land with a foot almost directly beneath their center of mass, or their hips. This allows a quicker and more horizontal push-off, minimizing the energy cost of vertical displacement and support, and maximizing the energy return from elastic recoil. With a foot directly beneath the runner, momentum is carried through to the next stride efficiently, minimizing braking and the energy cost of acceleration. Landing with the foot and leg exactly in the push-off position minimizes contact time between the feet and the ground, allowing maximal return of propulsion from elastic recoil. Foot strike and push-off become a single moment instead of a landing, glide, and then a push-off. A runner with this foot strike placement requires very little energy for balance. Finally, landing with a foot strike directly beneath the body maximizes the angle of deflection. Impact becomes a glancing blow, minimizing stress to the tissues and effectively carrying momentum forward without braking. The most effective way to learn optimal foot strike placement is a drill called running in place. Without forward momentum from the previous stride available to waste, a runner has to keep his foot strike directly beneath his center of mass. Alternately shift your weight from one foot to the other, simulating running but without moving forward. Lift one leg up directly beneath the hips, just a few inches at first, while bouncing on the other. Establish a quick rhythm. As you lift the legs in this drill, the knee moves slightly forward and the heel moves slightly backward. Lift the leg until the lower leg is parallel to the ground, with the knee as far in front of the body as the heel is behind it. Notice that during this drill, your feet always hit the ground directly underneath your hips. Try to do this drill with a foot strike that is 6 inches in front of your hips. If you can do it at all, significant energy will be wasted on balance and support, energy that should be used for propulsion. Most people cannot do it at all. Some can, but actually move backward. The next aspect of running technique we're going to cover is foot strike. What part of your foot hits the ground first? There are 3 possible methods of foot strike a runner can use. The first is a heel strike, with the weight coming down on the heel first. Most runners use this method of foot strike. The second type of foot strike is flat-footed. In this method, the heel and forefoot land simultaneously, with the weight coming down on both. The third method of foot strike is a forefoot strike. In this foot strike, the forefoot hits the ground first and bears almost all of the runner's weight. If the heel ever touches the ground, it never bears a significant amount of weight. Efficient runners use the forefoot strike. Efficient runners land on the balls of their feet and never allow their weight to be on their heels. A forefoot landing maximizes the body's natural shock absorption system. Just as the elastic tissues in the feet and calves provide propulsion, they also absorb impact stress. Allowing the heels to become weighted minimizes this function of the feet and calves. The heel is made primarily of bone and is designed for support, not cushioning. When a runner weights the heel at foot strike, the body's natural shock absorption system is bypassed. Impact stress is passed directly from the heel up through the ankle to the shin bone, frequently causing shin splints and stress fractures. The shin bone transmits the stress to the knee, which has minimal shock absorption capacity. Impact stress then travels directly up through the thigh bone to the hips to the low back, causing an assortment of injuries. None of these tissues, from the heel all the way up to the low back, is designed to absorb the stress of a runner's foot strike. Weighting the heels at any point in a runner's stride cycle prevents propulsion from the energy return of elastic recoil and allows impact stress to be transmitted to tissues that are not designed to withstand it. Our next drill is called the two-legged hop. Stand with your feet together, with your knees slightly bent and your weight shifted forward onto the balls of your feet. Begin to bounce, hopping just an inch in the air. Make sure that the knee angle stays constant and that all vertical movement comes from the elastic recoil action in the feet and calves. Concentrate on relaxation, especially in the quadriceps. Make sure to keep the hops very short and extremely quick. The purpose of this drill is to develop the ability to create power from the elastic recoil of the feet and calves instead of from muscular contractions of the thighs. Mastering this drill develops the skills of storing and releasing energy quickly through elastic recoil, creating quick contractions in the quadriceps to prevent knee bend at foot strike, and maintaining relaxation in the thighs when contractions are unnecessary. This drill also increases the strength, endurance, and elasticity of the muscles and connective tissue of the foot and calf. Now, try this drill flat-footed, putting half of your weight on the heel and half on the ball of your foot. You should feel that both the effort to maintain a quick turnover and the impact stress increase dramatically. Finally, try doing this drill from your heel. Even more of the same. Do you really want to run your next race that way? The next aspect of running technique we're going to talk about is developing propulsion. Efficient runners develop propulsion purely horizontally with a minimal vertical displacement, and they use large muscle groups to do it. Large muscle groups, obviously, can do more work without fatiguing than small muscle groups. Most runners use one of 2 methods of developing propulsion. I refer to these as the toe-off and the pull-through. Toe-off is the most common method. This uses the action of the quadriceps to straighten the knee for propulsion. This causes 2 major problems. First, straightening the knee does provide some horizontal propulsion, but it also provides significant vertical movement. Second, the quadriceps are a relatively small muscle group. Small muscle groups fatigue quickly. Efficient runners use the quadriceps only for support, not propulsion, when running on flat ground. Another problem with this method of propulsion that will affect triathletes and duathletes is that the quadriceps are the primary power producer for a cyclist. When a triathlete or duathlete gets off the bike and changes into their running shoes, they will run much faster if they use different muscle groups for propulsion on the run than they have in the bike. The second ineffective method of propulsion frequently used is the pull-through method. Many runners derive most of their propulsion by bending the knee at foot strike. While this may produce an energy-efficient horizontal movement, it places the responsibility of propulsion on a very small muscle group. Have you ever had to slow in the final miles of a race because of severe hamstring fatigue? If so, you may be a pull-through propulsion runner. Efficient runners use the large muscles of the hip more and the smaller muscles of the thigh less. Creating propulsion primarily at the hip instead of the knee engages greater muscle mass, reducing the relative intensity of the work for each muscle. Large muscles can do the same amount of work much easier than small muscles can. The largest and strongest muscle in the body is the gluteus maximus, or glutes. This muscle extends the thigh behind the hip. Efficient runners use hip extension to generate most of their propulsion. This movement at foot strike creates horizontal propulsion and uses several large muscles to do it. The glutes and hamstring muscles are both hip extensors. Which would you expect to be more powerful? Your hamstring muscles or your hamstring muscles and glute muscles combined? Obviously, those two muscle groups together could produce more power without fatiguing than the hamstrings could alone. I call the ideal method of producing propulsion the foot drag movement. The foot drag movement has the runner extend the hip while maintaining a constant, slightly bent knee angle from just before foot strike, during foot strike, and until after the foot leaves the ground. This places most of the stress of propulsion on the glutes, which dramatically reduces muscular stress in the thigh muscles, both quadriceps and hamstrings. Efficient runners understand that sustained, fast running, since it relies heavily on the glutes, is a real pain in the butt. Our next drill is called hip extension. Stand in your running posture and hold onto a railing or a partner for balance. Swing your leg with the knee slightly bent as far backward as you can. Pause for 5 seconds with your leg fully extended behind you to about a 45-degree angle. Feel the tension in the glutes. Maintain an upright posture and do not lean forward from the waist. Return to your running posture and repeat. The next propulsion drill we're going to work on is called the pendulum drill. Again, stand in your running posture and hold onto a railing or a partner for balance. Swing your leg with the knee slightly bent, backward and then forward again. The range of motion of the leg should be from about a 30-degree angle forward to a 45-degree angle backward. Maintain an upright posture and do not lean forward from the waist. Be careful not to allow the knee to bend or straighten significantly. Keep the movement relaxed and feel the gentle contractions in the glutes on the way back and the hip flexors on the way forward. As you gain a feel for the relaxation required for this drill, gradually speed up the movement. Just before foot strike, most runners hold their foot out in front of them and simply wait for gravity to pull them down into the ground. This is a very inefficient method of foot strike because it causes braking. When the foot hits the ground, the runner slows down. An athlete running at 8 miles per hour using this technique is asking their foot to instantaneously accelerate from 8 miles per hour to minus 8 miles per hour in order to create propulsion. All of this while the foot is weight bearing. Obviously, that is an impossible task. When the foot, traveling at 8 miles per hour, hits the ground, which is not moving, friction slows the runner down. Efficient runners actually start to pull the foot backward before foot strike. An efficient runner moving 8 miles per hour accelerates his foot backwards from 8 miles per hour to 0 miles per hour before the foot hits the ground. Obviously, it is easier to accelerate the foot and leg before they are weight bearing. This reduces braking at foot strike. The one category of energy expenditure we have not yet discussed is limb movement. Efficient runners minimize the energy cost of moving their legs and perform leg recovery in a way that enables very high turnover. Imagine swinging a 10-foot pole with a certain amount of force. Now cut the pole in half, hold the two pieces together, and swing with the same amount of force. The swing is faster. The pole didn't get lighter, but its center of mass moved closer to your hands, reducing the power required to swing it fast. In the same way, a runner can significantly reduce the energy cost and increase the speed of leg recovery by flicking the heel up towards his butt at the conclusion of the follow-through. During the follow-through, the leg and foot have significant angular momentum. If the runner immediately begins to drive his knee forward while keeping the thigh muscles relaxed, the heel and lower leg will swing upward from their own momentum without hamstring contractions, placing him in this position, which is optimal for a quick, efficient leg recovery. Most runners pause at the completion of the follow-through. This dissipates the backward momentum of the lower leg and foot, requiring contractions of the hamstring muscles to lift the heel and lower leg into the ideal recovery position. Once mastered, this movement will be quick, smooth, light, and relaxed. Make sure to feel the following. The forward knee drive begins powerfully immediately after follow-through. The foot is allowed to lag behind the knee on recovery, and the thigh muscles are kept very relaxed during leg recovery. Only the hip flexor muscles on the front of the hip and the very upper thigh should be working. Since the hamstring muscles contract to extend the hip and create horizontal propulsion, they should not be used for any unnecessary movements which would only increase fatigue. The arms play an important role in running. Though they don't develop propulsion, the arms set the rhythm for runners' strides. The arms determine turnover, the legs determine stride length. Keeping your arms pumping at 180 pumps per minute will make you a faster and more efficient runner. Just as bending the knee for leg recovery reduces energy costs by moving the center of mass of the leg closer to the hip, keeping the elbow bent reduces the energy cost of arm carriage. Efficient runners carry their arms with at least a 90-degree bend. Arm position plays a significant role in body position. Your average arm position should be directly at your side, so make sure that your arms swing backward as much as they swing forward. Many runners swing their arms well forward of the torso, but stop the backward movement when the arms are beside the torso. The average position of the arms is then well in front of the body, and the runner must lean slightly backward with the torso to counterbalance the arms. This reduces the efficiency of the foot strike. One common error with arm carriage is crossing over. Ideally, the arms will track almost perfectly in front of the shoulders, with just a very slight diagonal movement, indicating a very slight torso rotation. A very small torso rotation enables optimal balance. Many runners' arms cross in front of their chest, creating far too much torso rotation and wasting energy. Before your next run, check your heart rate just standing. Now rotate your shoulders back and forth for a minute and see just how much your heart rate increases. The techniques of evolution running are very effective for training you to run faster and more efficiently over flat ground, but they work even better on hills. Runners waste even more energy with inefficient movements when running up hills and when running down. If there's one time when even the worst heel striker lands on the balls of his feet and keeps his weight off the heels throughout the stride cycle, it's running up a hill. On moderately steep hills, a runner couldn't land on the heels even if he wanted to. The slope of the hill simply doesn't allow it. One benefit of evolution-style running is that you run up hills using the same muscles that you use in all of your training. A heel striker trains his calf muscles only when running uphill. And aren't hills where we ask the most of our muscles in a race? Many of the same evolution running techniques apply to uphill running. The force dynamics of running hard up a hill should not differ drastically from the force dynamics of flatland running. The difference should be in direction of force, not in the magnitude of force. Most runners make a huge mistake here. They push forcefully up the hill, allowing the slope to reduce turnover and using more forceful contractions to make up for the additional pull of gravity. As previously discussed, reduced turnover dissipates the energy stored in the muscles and prevents optimal energy return from elastic recoil. The muscles already are required to create substantially greater force to overcome gravity and propel the athlete uphill. Subtract the power of elastic recoil, and muscling up the hills becomes extremely costly. Even if optimal speed is maintained, it comes at a great metabolic cost, which will have to be paid back by reducing speed later in the race. Efficient runners allow uphills to reduce stride length instead of turnover, maintaining the same efficient 180 to 182 steps per minute rate used on flat ground and continuing to gain power from elastic recoil. Optimal speed is maintained and muscular fatigue is minimized by continuing to use this approach on hills. The primary differences between efficient flatland running and efficient hill running all stem from the fact that minimizing vertical displacement is not a goal for uphill running. The slope of the hill demands vertical displacement. Optimal vertical displacement for uphill running ensures that the runner's center of mass travels nearly on a line parallel to the slope of the hill. The following adaptations to evolution running technique are required to run efficiently on uphills. On flat ground, efficient runners create propulsion from hip extension and not from knee extension. Uphills, efficient runners use hip extension to provide horizontal propulsion, along with knee extension to provide vertical propulsion. At the moment of foot strike, the knee is slightly bent, but in the process of straightening. Extending the knee and using the quads creates the upward force required to move upward as well as forward. Over flat ground, this wastes energy and slows turnover, but uphills, it is necessary and efficient. Running up hills, you will not have very much downward vertical displacement before foot strike to help pre-stretch the tissues for elastic recoil. Concentrate on pulling your foot forcefully down into the ground, actually feeling like you are kicking the ground. Get this right, and you'll feel the same bounce as on flat roads. To enable the backward and downward foot drag, the knee must be brought up much higher during leg recovery and remain bent to a much more acute angle until the foot drag knee extension movement begins. Driving the knee powerfully upward puts the leg in a position to drive backward and downward into the ground, pre-stretching the muscles and providing both upward and forward propulsion. Using the glutes, hamstrings, and quadriceps muscles together at high turnover is critical. Running up hills, try to maintain the same body position relative to gravity as on flats. This will produce an even greater feeling of falling forward up the hill because your angle with the ground will become much more acute. Just as with flatland running, do not let the foot extend in front of the knee. The knee drives further forward and upward, and the foot does move slightly in front of the hips, but never in front of the knee. Practice running efficiently up hills. Concentrate on the following. Maintain the same high turnover used in flat ground running. Pump the arms with short, quick movements. During foot strike, drive the opposite knee toward the top of the hill. Pull the foot back down into the ground with a powerful motion. Don't just allow gravity to pull you down, actually kick the ground. Minimize contact time between the feet and the ground. Feel the bounce. Maintain the same body position with respect to gravity that you use for flatland running. If there's one place where optimizing running technique can pay off most, it is on downhills. The key to efficient downhill running is learning to use gravity instead of fighting it. The goals of evolution running, to minimize vertical displacement, to utilize elastic recoil, to take short and quick strides, to avoid braking, and to accomplish the heel flick with momentum, may be even more beneficial on downhills than on flats or uphills. Additionally, most runners' downhill techniques are even worse than their flatland techniques. Running downhill slowly requires more energy than running downhill fast. Downhills are the perfect place to reap the rewards of efficient running technique. There's a substantial amount of time and energy to be saved with good downhill technique and attitude. Gravity will provide much or all of the propulsion required to run fast downhill. Efficient downhill runners expend their energy on limb movement, support, and balance, but avoid using much energy either in braking or in propulsion. Gravity will provide plenty of power if you can avoid fighting against it and keep it under control. Learning to roll down hills. The wheel model provides the best insight into optimal downhill biomechanics. On a flat road, the wheel's center of support is directly under its center of mass and provides perfectly horizontal movement, exactly parallel to the road. The orientation between its center of support and center of mass rotates with the grade of the hill. The wheel's center of support will actually be behind its center of mass at an angle proportionate to the grade of the slope. In addition, the wheel will roll parallel to the slope instead of perfectly horizontally. Taking the analogy a step further, cyclists tend to pedal with less power on moderate hills and stop pedaling completely on steep downhills. The greater the assistance of gravity, the less force for propulsion is required from the athlete. To diagram the optimal theoretical downhill running technique, we simply rotate the diagram of optimal flatland technique in proportion to the grade of the hill. Notice that on downhills, the foot strike is actually positioned behind the hips and that the entire body leans forward in a straight line from the toes to the head. This is a very difficult movement to perfect because it feels like you are falling forward. In fact, efficient runners do fall forward down the hill in a controlled manner and with minimal braking. Leaning forward down the hill with the hips and shoulders and trusting your leg speed and balance takes time, but the rewards are amazing. Efficient downhill runners lean forward almost as much as the grade steepens, maintaining almost the same body position relative to the ground. They also develop propulsion relatively parallel to the ground. Most runners use what I call the stair-step technique to run downhill, creating horizontal propulsion and then allowing gravity to pull them down to the ground. The muscles contract forcefully for propulsion instead of allowing gravity to do the work, which prevents physical recovery during downhills. Stair-step running also dramatically increases landing impact, requiring more forceful contractions to catch the body weight at impact and increasing the risk for injuries. This stair-step style of brake-propel slows a runner down and uses much more energy than evolution running. If you feel like you run faster down hills but hit the ground harder, you are definitely a stair-stepper. Learn to roll down the hills and you'll run much faster, use less energy, and protect yourself from the damage of hard landings. To go back to the analogy of downhill cycling, when a cyclist with a combined bike and rider weight of 200 pounds rides along a flat road, there are 200 pounds of force on the tires. When he rides downhill, there is the same 200 pounds of force on the tires. In the same way, with perfect running technique, you don't need to hit the ground any harder on downhills than you do on flats. Instead of allowing gravity to provide additional impact stress, allow gravity to provide additional propulsion. The real key to this technique is actually putting your foot down behind your hips. While this sounds simple, it will take a while to establish the correct feeling and will take a long time to feel natural. Put your foot down much earlier during leg recovery than you do now. When you get it right, you'll feel yourself squirt forward at foot strike with no attempt to provide propulsion. Your natural reaction will be to reach forward with the other foot to regain balance. The regaining balance is actually braking. Fight that tendency. Maintaining balance does not have to mean slowing down. Put the other foot down behind the hips and squirt forward again. Learn to stay light on your feet, turn your legs over extremely quickly, and avoid braking. Let gravity do the work of propelling. Expend your energy supporting your body weight, maintaining your balance, and turning your legs over extremely quickly. For almost everyone watching this video, these techniques will be something brand new. Be patient with yourself. It will take time to learn them, but they will work for you. If you have further questions, contact us through our website, evolutionrunning.com. Thank you for joining us today, and good luck with your training and racing.